I flew from Canada to Greenland on a Dash 8. This international flight across the Arctic would take me from one capital to another, Iqaluit, Nunavut, to Nuuk, Greenland. Air Greenland is the Arctic Islands flag carrier, and flies this route once weekly during the summer season with their Dash 8 200s. This is a route that has been talked about quite a bit since it relaunched in 2024. It was previously served between 1981 and 1994, and again between 2012 and 2014. Now, I have wanted to go to Greenland since long before it became cool for people who make YouTube videos to go there. It's honestly been a bucket list destination for me for well over a decade, and Air Greenland's operation is a fascinating one. They have a fleet of Dash 8 200s used for domestic and shorter international flights like this one, as well as a medevac King Air, over a dozen helicopters, and a single A330-800neo for flights to Denmark. The thing is, most of the trips you see here on the channel are always kept really short for cost and scheduling purposes, and I knew if I was going to go to Greenland, I wanted to do it right. So, myself and two good friends made a week-long trip there last month, and, of course, it had to include one of Canada's most unique international flights. Iqaluit is the capital and largest city in Canada's Nunavut territory, and has a population of approximately 7,500 people. It is also the only official city in Nunavut, which became Canada's newest territory following its division from the Northwest Territories in 1999. Iqaluit is also a major hub for Canadian North, which, since merging with First Air, makes up almost all of the passenger traffic here. Canadian North has had an interline agreement with Air Greenland since 2023, making it possible to book flights right from southern Canada to Greenland with this connection. In our case, we deliberately chose a longer layover, because obviously we wanted to see some of the sights. It worked out to about 17 hours here after landing from Ottawa the previous evening. I would have preferred more time to visit, but we made do and woke up extra early to go walk around. Specifically, we walked through downtown and towards the harbor to get some good views of the whole city. Along the way, we also walked by the Legislative Assembly of Nunavut and a couple other points of interest. Being on an island, Iqaluit doesn't have the road connections to the south like Whitehorse and Yellowknife do, and so there's a large sea lift operation that takes place each summer. That delivers everything from non-perishable goods to vehicles, which is also the case in Nunavut's 24 other communities too. Everything else is generally flown in, either on Canadian North or on cargo jet. Back towards the airport, we also had a look at some of the spotting locations that YFB has to offer, and I will definitely be back here someday. After a delicious lunch, and with many thanks to a friend here for showing us around, we headed towards the airport for this not-so-ordinary Dash 8 flight. Iqaluit Airport has a beautiful modern terminal building that opened in 2017. It replaced the much smaller old terminal, which is still used to house the Iqaluit Flight Service Station and some airport offices. The new terminal was built as a public-private partnership with the government of Nunavut, and it was, at the time, the most expensive project undertaken by the territorial government. The upgrades didn't just include the terminal, but also a major apron expansion, runway repaving, and a new combined services building. Many buildings in northern Canada are built on stilts to avoid melting the permafrost below, which can cause buildings to settle unevenly. That's not the case here though, with the new terminal being built right on the permafrost. In order to keep the ground frozen, there are passive thermosiphons placed all around the building that circulate cool air to the terminal's foundation. Inside the terminal, there is lots of space in this wide-open departures hall. As you'd expect for a once-weekly flight, Canadian North does all of the services for Air Greenland here in Iqaluit. That does mean their systems are less integrated than you'd think, and check-in can only be done here at the counter. Seat selection is also done with this laminated seat map and a dry erase marker. With handwritten boarding passes in hand and bags dropped off, we went to look around the building a bit more before security opened. There's this big central rotunda with a cafe, extra seats, and lots of Inuit art on the walls. Many of the regional flights up north don't require any security screening, and so there are a couple of gates that are publicly accessible. As an international flight though, we, and any other 737 flights going to the south, do require screening, and there's tons of space in the post-security area. I think Yellowknife Airport could take a page or two from this new terminal. Now, unfortunately, I timed going through security poorly, but our Dash 8 had just arrived from Nuuk, this 28-year-old Dash 8 Q200, registered as Oscar Yankee Golf Romeo Papa. Originally built as a Bombardier Q200, it started out in 1997 with Brazilian carrier Tavage flying with them until 1999. It then made its way to Australia in 2001, being flown by Sunstate Airlines and Eastern Australia Airlines for QantasLink until 2014. It was then flown back to Canada, where Calgary-based Avmax refurbished and sold it to Air Greenland in September 2015. The Dash 8-200 is essentially the same airframe as the 100, but with more powerful engines and a slightly higher cruising speed. The Q part means it's equipped with an active noise and vibration suppression system, or ANVS, which comes standard on all Dash 8s built after 1996. The more powerful engines are especially important in Greenland, where many communities have airports with fairly short runways, including, up until the end of last year, Nuuk itself. That's something I'll talk about more once we're on our way over. I will also point out that, although Greenland is an autonomous territory of Denmark, their aircraft are Danish registered since Denmark still regulates civil aviation there. Naturally, a classic Dash 8 does not take too long to turn around, and they were soon ready for boarding. Let's go see what Air Greenland is like on this very unique international route.
Please, boarding is now available for the Greenland flight with service to Nuuk. Please proceed to gate 2 with your ticket and passport in hand.
Kimberly Flight 831. You're back to the RP graduates. Both please come on over. Thank you.
My seat for today would be in 4A, the middle exit row on this Dash 8-200. These planes only have 9 rows overall in the Dash 8's usual 2-2 layout. The legroom here in this row is excellent, and there's a great view of the propeller and the main landing gear from here. There are 37 seats on these Dash 8-200s, with the last row having 5 seats across. The seats are typical of most classic Dashes, but have been nicely reupholstered sometime in the last few years. We were soon welcomed on board in Greenlandic, English, and Danish, followed by the safety briefing, again in all 3 languages.
Welcome on board on this Air Greenland this 8 flight bound for Nuuk. Our flight time to Nuuk is estimated to be 1 hour and 40 minutes, and we wish you a pleasant flight.
With that, here's our departure from Iqaluit, making an intersection takeoff from runway 16.
Fasten your seatbelt like this. Please note, the crew members will be wearing red life vests.
Today's flight takes us eastbound from Baffin Island, across the Davis Strait, and then into Nuuk, situated right on the southwest coast of Greenland. The flight would only take us an hour and 45 minutes, but interestingly, the 2 cities have a 3-hour time difference, despite being about 800 kilometers apart. That's about the same distance as Calgary to Comox, Vancouver Island. Sitting in the seat was also a nice reminder of just how much I like the exit rows on the classic Dash. Especially with a free aisle seat, this was very comfortable. In front of you, Air Greenland has a standard tray table that folds down but doesn't slide. Below that is a large seatback pocket with plenty of contents. First up, there was a little pamphlet talking about the usual restrictions of an exit row seat, again in all 3 languages, a nicely branded air sickness bag with some translations of common phrases in each language, and the safety card for the Dash 8. This also pointed out the location of survival equipment, including polar suits, which is a first for me seeing that on any safety card. Lastly, there was also a copy of Air Greenland's in-flight magazine, which was full of interesting articles, all written trilingually. There was also a page about their app, which I downloaded for the next couple of flights, and of course a fleet page and route map at the very back. It did feel pretty surreal to be flying on this sole link between Canada and Greenland. Not long after we took off, our one cabin crew member came through offering a selection of drinks, and I went for this cup of coffee to start. That was soon followed up with a second drink and an actual meal service. I had a cup of water and one of these meal boxes. In there was a light dinner of meatballs and potato salad with some vegetables. These were served cold since Dash 8s aren't exactly set up for hot meals, but it was all really tasty. It also occurs to me that this is the first time I've ever gotten real food on a Dash 8. There were 18 passengers on today's flight, and with a total capacity of 37, that means the flight was just under half full. Air Greenland has already said that the flight will return for 2026, albeit with a slightly shorter season. With tourism to Greenland growing, I do hope this route will stick around, especially since it reduces the travel time between the 2 cities from literal days to just these 2 hours. Outside of the summer, if you wanted to fly from Iqaluit to Nuuk, you'd have to fly 3 hours south to Ottawa first, then across the Atlantic to either London or Paris, get a connecting flight to Copenhagen, and then hop on Air Greenland's A330. United does have their new route from Newark to Nuuk, but that too is only seasonal. You could also go from Ottawa to Toronto, then Keflavik, and then to Nuuk from there, but either way, what is a 2-hour journey now would turn into more like 2 or 3 days at the very least. That's not to mention the extra stop that had to be made up until November last year. Nuuk is the largest city in Greenland with a population of 20,000, but up until late 2024, its airport had a runway that was only 3,100 feet or 950 meters long. Because of that, Air Greenland's hub prior to this was in Kangerlussuaq, an old US Air Force base located further inland with more consistent weather and a runway long enough for wide-body planes. That's where Air Greenland would send their A330s, both old and new, from Copenhagen, for the Dash 8s to then collect passengers and take them to their respective destinations. With Nuuk being the administrative and commercial center of Greenland though, and the limited number of airliners that could realistically use such a short runway, especially long-term, the decision was made to expand the airport. In what was one of Greenland's largest infrastructure projects, the 3,100-foot runway was extended to 7,200 feet, or 2,200 meters. That would allow the Air Greenland A330 and other jets to finally fly right to the capital. There's been a lot of change there in just the last few years, and part of me wishes I could have made it here back when the Kangerlussuaq hub was at its peak. That airport is still staying open, so maybe that's something for another trip. Meanwhile, there was yet another drink service about 40 minutes before landing, which came with a muffin. The single lavatory on the Dash 8-200 is still very Dash 8 sized, and like a lot of Canadian operators, there's no running water given the cold conditions that these fly in. We eventually reached our top of descent, and we got our first glimpse of land since leaving Iqaluit. This flatter landscape quickly gave way to these beautiful mountains around Nuuk, and here's our arrival into Greenland's capital, landing on runway 22.
to the fasten seatbelt sign has been switched off.
So that was a long-awaited flight crossed off my bucket list. What a cool experience that was, flying a Dash 8 across the Arctic. Air Greenland had an excellent onboard service, and that exit row seat was quite comfortable. I honestly didn't expect to get that many drinks and a proper meal on a short flight like this. The other bonus is, since we've now technically entered the EU, I now have one of my most cherished stamps in my passport. It's also nice that, despite being a flight across the Arctic, it was not horribly expensive. The whole ticket booked through Canadian North from Ottawa to here cost me $800 Canadian. Even just for this leg, next summer, prices start at $325 Canadian, which is really not that bad for Arctic travel. There are flights a fraction of the distance within just Baffin Island that cost more than that. Either way, I could not have been more stoked to start this Greenland adventure with such a cool flight, and I will absolutely be taking this route again someday. Thank you so much for watching this first of many flights with Air Greenland, and I'll see you in the next one.